Guarneri.
That's a good Italian name. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to be able to present from a clinician's perspective. I really do spend a majority of my life seeing patients, and it's wonderful to hear the science behind the things that I'm seeing clinically in my practice. We've already heard an enormous amount about human health being acutely and chronically affected by climate change. But what I'd like to discuss today, the value of a systems model approach to healthcare delivery that's very different from what we're currently doing. And to review just one or two successful models in healthcare, agriculture, and institutions which come from the ground up. And I really believe it's the ground up where we're going to see change. In case you're wondering, this is not Rahm's artery. This is the end stage of what I see every day in my practice, which is advanced cardiovascular disease. And as I shared yesterday, we were taught really that this was a cholesterol, diabetes, and obesity problem, but we know today it's a problem of inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction, of which things like air pollution and heavy metals play a very, very pivotal role. So we have spent, and I have spent years of my life putting in these little metal sleeves called stents, and to repair what we call broken hearts. Now, the reality of this is Western medicine is very good at acute care, and certainly if you need a stent or a diagnostic procedure, I think we're very blessed to have these in our toolbox. But we know that we are awful at disease prevention, and the way we handle chronic disease is missing the mark. And I'd go as far as to say what we learned from Professor Sachs, that it's almost a sin. The World Health Organization, of course, reminds us that 3 in 10 deaths globally are from cardiovascular disease, and most of this could be prevented by lifestyle. What we're seeing clinically is rises in diabetes, rises in obesity, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, dementia, which we now call type 3 diabetes, and the list goes on, a host of preventable chronic illnesses. Now, when we think about chronic disease, many of my colleagues like to blame it on genetics, but genetics are just the tip of the iceberg. Our environment, the toxins we're exposed to, the foods we eat, the life that we live interacts with our genome, and we know this, scientifically proven, that we can alter the epigenome and we can alter gene expression by how we live our lives. You've already seen this diagram, and I'm not going to spend much time on it, but just to say that even in Southern California, I have diagnosed West Nile virus, I have diagnosed dengue. We have a rising level of people having aerosol-related, pollen-related allergies and illnesses. And of course, we've already discussed the whole topic of emotional and mental problems related from climate refugees, air pollution. And not mentioned yet is that about 1/4 of the El Salvadoran farmers now have chronic kidney disease related to drought conditions, which is inconceivable to me. We've talked about the agricultural industry, but I'd like to bring in Gandhi, because it was Gandhi who said the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. And we've been talking about the agricultural industry in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but I'd also like to remind us about how we treat the animals and the cruelty to animals, and what we do inside of animal CAFOSs, which is directly affecting human health. Antibiotics given to prevent infection as opposed to treat infection, hormones leading to pro-inflammatory meat, documented antibiotic resistance in humans. And yet when we look at what the United States is subsidizing, I'm horrified to say that $8.6 billion has gone to subsidize the livestock industry. We've heard a lot about industrial agriculture, monocultures, particularly corn, which ultimately gets into our food supply as high fructose corn syrup in every possible variable form. Not to mention the unsustainability of water use. And in my practice, we do nutrient assessments on our patients, and I have to tell you that micronutrient depletion is real. And you've heard this mentioned already. It's quite ironic that the food system that was supposed to feed us actually ends up increasing the price of fruits and vegetables and decreasing significantly the price of unhealthy things like carbonated soft drinks, sugar, sweets, fats, and oils. The exact opposite of what we know from the research on nutrition. Hard for you to see here, but level A evidence on a Mediterranean diet in prevention and treatment across the board of cardiovascular disease. And if you look to the top of the pyramid, that's exactly what we're subsidizing. We're subsidizing meat, we're subsidizing corn, we're subsidizing soy, exactly the opposite of what we should be recommending that people eat. So our subsidies and our policies are not right. You've already heard about the carbon footprint of a vegetarian diet. I went a little further and put in a vegan diet versus a traditional Western meat-based diet. I'd like to add that we're starting to see in our literature over and over again that pesticides, herbicides like atrazine are coming up over and over again as obestogens, leading to insulin resistance, obesity, and diabetes. And this is currently all over the medical literature. Persistent organic pollutants linked to mitochondrial dysfunction and insulin resistance. So when we see our patients with diabetes now, we have to factor in what types of fruits and vegetables they're eating, where they're buying their produce, and what is their burden of pesticides and herbicides. Again, in my cardiology practice, you heard today mentioned 50% of cardiovascular events are explained by the classic things we know: diabetes, high blood pressure. 50% of MIs, people don't have these issues. And what we're seeing is, yes, air pollution is playing an important role, but I'd like to call attention to all of the heavy metals that are currently linked to disease and are getting into our soil and into our water supply, with breast cancer now being linked to cadmium, arsenic all over the place, linked to cardiovascular disease and to various cancers, kidney disease linked to cadmium, heart disease linked to mercury. We think this way in Western medicine. We think in ologies. I'm a cardiologist, so I'll take care of the heart. The neurologist will take care of the brain. And this is a fundamental flaw in our system. It's a fundamental flaw in our teaching. We have to think holistically, and we have to think more systemically if we're going to be successful in taking care of our patients. But instead, what we've adopted is an ill-to-the-pill approach where every disease becomes a little diagnosis unto itself, and every diagnosis warrants a pill. And this is the reality in the U.S. and in many other areas. We have polyills, polypills for polyills. Gross domestic product in the pharmaceutical industry is 2% in the United States, and many developed countries, Spain, Portugal, Greece, and so on, greater than 1% going to the pharmaceutical industry. Why is it important? If we shift over to the UK, you see the second blue line there, the tallest of all, is the carbon footprint for the pharmaceutical industry. So if we keep making people sick, we're going to need more big pharma, and we're going to need more hospitals. Hospitals in the US, 2.3 million tons per year of waste. So this is a diagram we put together for our report, which basically shows on your left the food industry with subsidies to meat and dairy, again remembering that that's not the best thing on the Mediterranean diet program, corn and soy, as well as the whole industrialized agricultural machine with transporting of food, obviously leading to a lot of the physical illness that we see, diabetes, obesity, and so on. Not only that, leading to greenhouse gas emissions, which have been adequately discussed already. And now when we have all these sick people, we have a pharmaceutical industry to turn to, which is happy to give every pill for every ill, and the pharmaceutical industry footprint is one of the largest that we have on greenhouse gas emissions. The American Medical Association knows this. I mean, here's a major medical group saying non-sustainable food at low immediate financial cost to the consumers at the expense of poorer health outcomes that cost far more to treat with medications and procedures than investments in healthy food. They know this, yet we don't move the system. You still go to the hospital and you get served unhealthy food. Well, I believe we are really at a tipping point, and I praise the UK for putting together this wellness route map. I think this is a highway for the healthcare sector, where we shift the system from an institution-led service to health and social care becoming part of the community, where we stop just doing disease care and we actually start to focus on early intervention and prevention. We need new indicators. We need a much more meaningful scorecard, and you heard that come up in regards to the gross domestic product. We need a scorecard that focuses on health and well-being and happiness and quality of life, not just how many patients can we see in a day. And we need to be in partnership with our patients. So the shift from disease care to creation of health is the model I believe we need to go, and this is where I've been focusing for the last 20 years. We have to not have sustainability as an add-on. It must be integrated in everything that we do, in our culture, in our practice, and in our training. This is a community opportunity. We need to take healthcare, quite frankly, out of the healthcare institutions because it's about health, not about disease. We have been, in the United States, we created in La Jolla, California, an international organization called the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine to bring together all stakeholders, not based on a degree, but based on a philosophy. And the philosophy is about prevention, it's about treating the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, and it's about sustainability. And we invite all health practitioners, if you believe in this and you can walk to this message, then you need to be with us. So we've been filling in the gaps where medical schools leave off. Medical schools don't teach nutrition. They don't teach that air pollution causes heart disease. They don't teach physical activity is important. They basically teach disease care after people get sick. We are marching along with the World Health Organization's Traditional Medicine Strategy, which just 2 weeks ago has now been renamed the Traditional Integrative Medicine Strategy, and we are following in suit to those recommendations. We need to shift from an ego-driven model to an eco-driven model. We are currently in healthcare, in the pharmaceutical industry, in the agricultural industry, and the list goes on, sitting in an ego-driven model, and we need to break down that silo. We need to start going from parts to the whole. We need to start going from the me to the we, and we need to think that we are all connected because we are. There are some amazing, amazing superstar things happening, again, from the ground up. This is the Nuka system of care, which is coming out of South Alaska. Poor region, terrible health care. The community came together. They met for over a year. The community got involved in their own ownership of their healthcare system. They moved from a centrally organized bureaucratic system, from the hierarchy to the we, to a customer ownership system where they take control of their own healthcare. And the results are staggering: 63% reduction, 36% reduction in ER visits, 95% satisfaction, and so on. So this is one of the ground-up models that I think we need to pay attention to. There was talk yesterday of how do we motivate people, and I put this in because of our faith-based network here. This is the Daniel Plan, Reverend Rick Warren at Saddleback Church, recognizing that he couldn't baptize his congregation because they were all overweight, and he was overweight, and although he makes a joke out of it, he decided to turn to the Bible and came up with the one line, "Your body is your temple." And he brought in a few healthcare practitioners, and basically he launched a program called the Essentials of Health: Faith, Food, Fitness, Focus, and Friends. And with this program, within 1 year, his congregation lost 250,000 pounds. So when we talk about how do we motivate people by coming together, human contact, connection, and support. The American College of Physicians recommends that the health sector get on board with sustainable and energy efficient practices. This could be across the board from transportation to food service. And I just want to highlight two of these. You already heard every health system, school, hospital, organization should be purchasing locally, organic, sustainable foods. Get it from the neighborhood. This is happening across the board now in many institutions, and the celebration of Meatless Mondays, which goes along with our climate footprint. They are currently estimating at the University of Washington that they cut their GHG emissions by 11.8%. Seattle Children's Hospital, let's get people to stop driving to work. Let's get them to walk. So what did they do? They made area more walkable, cycling. They put in capital investments with a bike shop right on the campus. They linked shuttles to parking lots and so on. And what they were able to achieve in a short period of time was trips by employees dropped from 73% to 38% car use. This is another powerful story. The Commission for Healthcare Working Group in Boston, all major Boston area hospitals involved, they have a commitment to drop greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2020 and 100% by 2050. They have already saved $15 million. And if you take a look at just Boston Medical Center alone, 100% carbon neutral by 2018. This is the power of change, and this can happen. We need to just keep marching these programs straight through everywhere. Now, the Global Alliance for the Future of Food talks about having a food care system that's holistic, nutrition-based, for health, happiness, social, and cultural indicators, not a GDP. Looking at a system that focuses on a functioning food and agricultural system that is consistent with what people want and need. And I'm so proud to say we have, I think, the best health food commons in Fresno, California, a very impoverished area of California, which is a breadbasket for the country, yet the people there just weren't thriving. So the community came together and they decided to develop a new economic model. Everything from farm production to processing to distribution to retail sales is owned by the Fresno Health Trust, and all the money that's made goes right back into the community. These are the kind of models that are powerful. One of the most ambitious regional efforts to reimagine the food system from farm to plate. That's a quote from The Guardian. So we are all stakeholders, every single one of us. We all have a role to play. And it's pretty straightforward to me that this has always been a win-win situation from when I started to have this conversation with Ram many years ago. We need a model of healthcare that's holistic, treats the whole person, that's ecological based, that's based on ecological medicine, because the planet too is our patient and our client. We cannot forget about climate justice, and we need to, quite frankly, eat less meat and change our food guidelines just like they did in Brazil. So Brazil gets a big plus for changing their food guidelines to be more consistent with the belief systems of their people. Sustainable food guides, phase out or get rid of, put a sugar tax. I'm totally in favor of a sugar tax. Teach people how to do good food purchasing. Participatory budgeting. I'm so glad that Scott Peters is here, because it would be wonderful to have our community involved in getting together with groups to talk about how do we have our commons. San Diego is our commons. Everything that's there is part of our commons, and how do we take care of it and how do we budget for it? And ownership does matter, because I personally want to support those organizations like the Fresno Food Commons, which has ownership by the people, for the people. No one can come in and buy the Fresno Food Commons. Smart climate healthcare, I think everyone's getting on board with that. We all have an obligation to have zero waste in our homes, our schools, and our hospitals. And we have to remember that we are all citizens of this planet, planet Earth. And if we're going to have a new operating system, if we're going to have an ecological model of healthcare, if we're going to change the way we do business, we need the skill set of people who can teach this. And how do we shift our communities from the I to the we, from the and get it all to the us, and be in this together. Pope Francis put it beautifully: the economy should not be a mechanism for accumulating goods, but rather the proper administration of our common home. It is an economy where human beings, in harmony with nature, structure the entire system of production and distribution in such a way that the abilities and needs of every individual find suitable expression in social life. This is exactly what the Food Commons is doing. This is exactly what the Nuka healthcare system is doing, and this is exactly what I believe we should all be doing. Thank you for your attention.